I am joined now by Philip Keevil. He's senior partner at Compass Advisers. Philip spent over 30 years of investment banking experience. He began his career at Morgan Stanley in New York back in 1975. Well, also joining me is Alistair Milne, a senior finance lecturer at Cass Business School. Alistair has previously worked for the Bank of England and the Treasury. Let's ask our guests about what they think of the President's proposals and what they mean for banks, and of course whether they can actually work. First of all, good morning. Welcome to both of you.
Good morning.
If I could begin by asking you, Alistair, about what you actually think of Obama's plans. We've had a weekend to digest them. Will they work?
Well, I think I'm sympathetic to the plans, but also one other thing to say, it's not quite clear how they're going to work in practice. There's very, very little detail. And if you read what's on the White House press briefing, they actually think, what's all the fuss about? Because the actual wording on the White House website makes them sound very, very minor indeed. They say we're going to limit some proprietary trading, but not many banks do much proprietary trading. But I think the real thing is that this is maybe opening the door for some more radical interventions, further down the line. It all depends on Congress.
Philip, what do you think of these plans? Obviously, there is a huge political element. People saying over the weekend Scott Brown in Massachusetts has got an awful lot to answer for.
Yes, I think it's a lot to do with Scott Brown, the way it was rushed out. I think Paul Volcker was somewhat of a voice in the wilderness, and suddenly...
Yes, where had he been all this time?
Suddenly you get two old guys, they're even older than me, which means they're pretty old. I mean, it's sort of being wheeled out, and perhaps they harking back to days when investment banks are private and commercial banks only lent retail, and this kind of risk wasn't going to be taken. But I think the President's completely missed the point, unfortunately.
It's completely missed the point in the sense that this wouldn't...
what caused the crisis, and if that's what they're trying to do. I mean, arguing that retail banks shouldn't engage in proprietary trading when it would appear that apart from probably Citi and Wachovia, none of the others had that effect. It had nothing to do with what happened at Lehman and Bear Stearns and Merrill and the like, nor UBS. So it was... I think it completely missed the point.
That is a fair point, that while bank bashing might be good for votes, it just doesn't actually... This wouldn't have solved the crisis and maybe wouldn't solve a crisis in the future.
That's, I think, where we differ a little. I think, again, there's a lot of misunderstanding. Many people have said this is a return to Glass-Steagall, splitting retail from investment banking. That's not the point at all. What the Obama and this new set of advisors, I think, have correctly identified is at the heart of the crisis was a very, very big build-up of investment bank balance sheets.
And not just simply bad lending on subprime?
But bad lending on subprime was a small part of the story. It was the trigger. But the big thing that caused all the illiquidity was many banks, UBS, Merrill Lynch, Citi and many others, inflating their balance sheets in an irresponsible way. And so the real issue is this the kind of proposal that will stop that happening again? And
do you agree with that?
Well, I agree that the problem was the investment banks inflating, and there's probably... So, go ahead, sorry.
No, well, I'm just looking forward now, whether or not these plans all come into place. What President Obama has arguably done is have set the hair running. If we want consensus, are we going to have to see it broadly across the board? Is the G7 likely to do that?
Well, that's the other problem I have with what Obama did, is because it looks like he wasn't consulted. He didn't consult at all, which is a typical U.S. unilateral action by the U.S. government in reaction to something that happened in Massachusetts and panic over upcoming congressional elections. So it's really it's a problem, because unless the global organizations, IMF, G7, G20, whatever, work together on a solution, then you're just going to get tit-for-tat competition between the regulators.
But I think my point would be is that there's a germ of an idea that could come out of these Obama-Volcker proposals. So there's the possibility, and it's going to take 3 months, 6 months, there's the possibility that the entire G7 could actually come on board with, in line with proposals of this nature. A lot depends on the British election. If the Conservative Party come behind proposals of this flavour, i.e. quantity restrictions on investment bank activities, then they could become G7 policy as well.
But can we see, say, France, Germany, they don't have any history of splitting banks in this way. Can you imagine that they would come on board with these proposals?
It's not splitting. It's quantity restrictions.
Well, it is, but here's the problem. The US and the UK, the US is the one that had the biggest problems, right? And they had the greatest number of banks. There's already a restriction of 10% on deposits in US banking. France and Canada are much more concentrated, and they had none of these problems. So I think that part of what the president's proposing is completely missed. And what Alistair's talking about, the build-up of assets and leverage in the investment banks, and by the way, you know, trading of derivatives and not on exchanges, all those things are completely missed. So he's taking a big swing at the banks. You know, he's destroyed the poor shareholder, the bank shareholders. Those are the ones who already paid, not the government. The government's getting paid back. The shareholders got killed, and they're getting killed again.
Okay, Philip Keevil and Alistair Milne, thank you very much indeed.